So, Jeannie, how about let's get started here. I'm just the way you talk always gets me so inspired because, guys, both of us have been there. I was completely sick. I was 118 pounds. Today, I'm about 180 pounds. I could not walk. I had a wheelchair, a cane. I was on chemotherapy because my immune system was so down that they thought maybe a viral infection would kill me. So I was on TPN feeding tubes, which is the worst elemental food in the world. And I was on massive steroids. I was on 3 grams of Dilaudid, which is a cancer patient's dosage. So, and today I'm drug free, and that's my choice. I'm not saying that's best for everybody, but I don't need any drugs. I'm able to travel the world. My digestive sensitivity has gone down probably 80%. My colonoscopy shows a 75% decrease in disease, and I was able to do this holistically over years of effort and trying and doing and adding this whole thing into a program. And I'm sure, Jeannie, you had those times where it wasn't working and you were having those hard times, but it was about, coming from a healthy mindset and being solution oriented and
exactly.
taking it to grow. And that's where we can really just take, even anyone who's listening, take what you can from here with me and Jeannie talking today. I'm telling you, Jeannie is one of the best in the absolute world. I'll give you everything I have with my experience. Take what you can from it. If it's everything for you, great. If it's part of it, great. Just grow from it. Continue to take what you can and grow. That's how you're going to get the results you want. Healing starts in the mind. So, Jeannie, what effects, so I know you started with a lot of different probiotics, so did I. What effects did Natren probiotics have in your recovery? I mean, what was that story?
Well, for me, going back to that naturopath, and I said I don't tolerate anything. And so he suggested I start with the Bifido factor because I was prone to diarrhea. So I did. And again, I started with, I think I tried to take a 1/4 teaspoon, and that was too much. And also at the time, I didn't understand the Herxheimer detox reaction. Yes. I didn't understand that a potent probiotic will kill off the bad bacteria, and it will also kill off Candida, which upon its death releases 168 different toxins. So you can have some bad effects. You can have nausea, headaches, some fatigue, dizziness, brain fog, if you kill off too much too fast. So that's the other reason I get people to start with the powders where they can totally calibrate the dose. So I think after the 1/4 teaspoon, I dialed back to more. 1/8 of a teaspoon, I think, was where I could tolerate. And I started. And as soon as I started on that, within a very short period of time, I can't even remember now because this was like over 25 years ago, but I know a very short period of time, like maybe less than a week, I saw my stool start to form up, which had never happened. So that's when I went, wait a minute, this is different. We're on to something. And then I continued to build up to the full dose of the Bifido factor. And then I think the second one I tried was the Megadophilus. So, and then again, went through the same process, building it gradually, and then went on to the Digestalac and built that gradually until I was up to the full dosage of all 3 species.
Yeah, great point too. And just for the audience out there, what would you say would be one of the benefits of taking the powder with the growth medium in it?
I think again, I want to say it's more powerful, especially if you're tending towards diarrhea. But at the same time, you do have to test it and see. And this is the thing, because we're all different, because our guts are all in different states, for you, you might respond better to the encapsulated powders, but I might respond better to the loose powders. So you do have to test it. But if you were to say, well, I can only get one, what should I try? I would say start with the loose powders.
Okay, so Jeannie, thank you so much. Great points there. And what are some of the top reasons Natren Probiotics stands out for you? And for me, it was, hey, I was taking BioK, I was taking Claire Labs, I was taking VSL3, I was taking anything naturopath doctors were telling me about, and I don't know how well versed they were. And I must have spent well over 5 figures over the years and just every day, and I didn't feel like I was getting anything. The only time I felt like I was getting any results is when I started just sipping on raw fermented sauerkraut. And then I said, I was like, well, that was my big one. So especially if I was to have a more of a paleo meal, like a meat and veggies type of meal, I would do a lot of raw sauerkraut. And I worked up to, I mean, probably this much per serving, maybe even that. So I worked
Wow.
up and worked up and worked up because I found that the probiotics were 10 times more expensive and I wasn't feeling any results. But with the fermented sauerkraut and sometimes kimchi, non-spicy kimchi, I saw results. Now, when I did make my own unpasteurized goat's milk yogurt that I made in my own home, and I didn't really see many results. But I saw a lot of people on the internet who said they had great results from that. So I think that goes to your point that you have to try and see what works for you. And whether you're getting a capsule, you're getting a dairy medium, a dairy-free medium, powder, you just got to work with your health practitioner and find what's best for you. Hopefully you swish it on the first shot. If you don't, keep trying. So, Jeannie, when you're looking at Natron's probiotics, what are some things that stand out over, some of the other companies, or the whole industry? Like what really stands out for you where you say that's worth the investment?
I think there's two big points. First of all, Natron is the only brand of probiotics I've seen that guarantees a live bacterial count of each species, not a total, through to the date of expiration. So you look on the bottle of any other probiotic, they'll say guaranteed live. It'll be at the time of manufacture. So it's like when they put it in the bottle, this is what they're guaranteeing. But nobody else guarantees that through to the printed expiration date on that bottle, this is how much is going to be live of the species contained. Here's the other part of that. Natron will actually list out the individual species, the strain of that species, and the number of CFU. Other companies will list the species and strains, but they won't say how much of each species. So let's take Acidophilus, for example. Acidophilus is a common bacteria. Most people have heard of it. There's, of all the strains, there's like 13 different strains that are commonly used of Acidophilus. Only, I believe, 2 of those have antiviral capabilities. So that tells you about the robustness and strength of that strain of the Acidophilus species of bacteria. But a manufacturer is not going to tell you how much of the expensive strain is in there and how much of the cheap strain is in there, because the expensive one is the one that has this broad antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal capability. Natron will. They'll tell you how much of each species and they'll guarantee it to the date of expiration. So that for me is a huge selling point because these probiotics are not cheap. They're a very expensive, very potent product. And so you may go to another brand that's cheaper, but so you're ingesting mostly dead bacteria, which I will say do have a beneficial effect. They've done tests in Petri dishes. So you've got your pathogen, your bad bacteria or whatever, your virus in a Petri dish, and they drop in the live bacteria to the center of the Petri dish. The pathogen flees to the outer edges to get away from the good bacteria. Then they repeated the experiment with dead bacteria, right? That had, been left sitting on the counter and had, died from, lack of whatever. And they dropped that in the Petri dish and the pathogen still moved to the outer edges. So there's something even within dead bacteria. Maybe there's the vibrational resonance or some type of thing. Like we don't understand enough. So you may be taking, one of these other brands and having a beneficial effect. So that's great. But are you getting the beneficial effect that's equivalent to the amount of money you paid for that product? Maybe not, right? So that's the first thing that stands out. And then the second thing that stands out is these microorganisms, the lactobacillus-based organisms, so we're not talking about soil-based organisms. We're talking about food-cultured bacteria. They need to be refrigerated. And they need to be refrigerated from the second they leave the manufacturer until they arrive on your doorstep and you put them in your fridge. Now, within that, you've got about, I'd say 48 hours for that product to get to room temperature or maybe a little warm and still be okay. But not much more. Yeah, not much more than that.
48 hours. So if you got it shipped and you were like, I'm not going to get home for 6 hours, it still should be okay.
Oh yeah. And like if you open your box and the product is room temperature or a little warm, but it left the factory 2 days ago, then you're still going to be fine. That's still going to be at potency.
Yeah.
Longer than that, then I think you're going to start to see a reduction. So that's the other point of distinction with Natron, is that their product is refrigerated from the minute it leaves the factory till either it lands in your retail health store and they put it in the fridge, or they have a few online vendors that they have licensed to sell their product. My store is one of them because we guarantee, usually we provide it in 1 day. We have a refrigerated box with ice packs. We ship it out the door and we say to people, don't order this if you're not going to be home, because you don't want it sitting on your doorstep with like direct sun on it. Yeah. So we've kind of worked out those systems. So there's a few online retailers, and then also you can order from, natron.com themselves, but that will get to you within that window of keeping that bacteria, cool and alive. Yep. So those are the two things. And there's no other probiotic that sells in retail stores that guarantees that refrigerated shipping and supply chain. So that's the other. And so you mentioned the VSL, which is interesting because I was talking to someone in the industry and they said, well, the thing with VSL is because they have some good clinical trials supporting that product.
Very much
but the clinical trials, they told me, and I have no verification on whether this is accurate or not, but they seem to know. They said those clinical trials were carried out with the VSL straight from the lab. The VSL that you're consuming has been shipped in a non-refrigerated truck, stored somewhere, and then the store is either put it on the shelf or in the cooler, but it hasn't been refrigerated for the whole. So again, the one that you're consuming has nowhere near the potency of the one straight out of the lab where they did the clinical trials.
Yep.
So this is another, and again, it all comes down to cost, right? Like if you want to ship refrigerated, that is a huge increase in cost. And so most manufacturers are not willing to deal with that.
And that's a good point. And the same thing with me. I don't receive free Natrons. I'm not a Natron salesperson. I just was looking for something that could substantially help my gut besides diet or lifestyle changes and start to heal root cause. The more I read about probiotics, the more I was saying, this is something I have to target. Who's going to help me do this? When I saw Natron, the two things that stood out for me were, one, they weren't, they weren't bought out by some holding company. They are a family-owned, we both know Natasha Tronev. We've both taken the time to speak with her about her company and just, see that they make their own products in-house. I think one of the big problems with other companies is they're not making their own probiotics. They're outsourcing the probiotics to another company who's using the same formulas with 19 different companies and labels. And these companies are private labeling these probiotics and selling them days with mislabeling. And, I've been around the nutritional supplement game for a while, where I'm seeing, all these different types of people who are private labeling and doing all these ways of taking the same product with the same problems and just saying, hey, it's a little different. It's just really just different packaging, but what's in it is the exact same. Yeah. And so not being with a holding company was huge for me. The guaranteed living was absolutely big too. The proper labeling was absolutely big. And just also the versatility. If you have Crohn's, and we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, guys. If you have Crohn's, or you have IBS, or you have IBD, or you have gastritis, or you have ulcerative colitis, you can regimen and specifically dose yourself with these probiotics. And you can work with your health practitioner to say, this is what I'm going to focus on, this is when I'm going to focus on, this is how I'm going to take it. And you can start building your own personalized program around your probiotics to get optimal results. Whereas everything else is just take a dose, take a dose. So that's a huge, huge benefit, and that's self-empowerment we can control. And that I get excited about that. I get excited when I can control something and I can make a difference in my own life with my own choice, my own decision to learn more. This is a big one, anyone out there who has irritable bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome, what makes probiotics so special? Why should they take the time?
If you don't have that good, and you look like if you're educating yourself about your illness, you probably know this already, but You look at everything from cancer to chronic fatigue to lupus to IBD. Everyone is talking about how the microbiome is the foundation to health in the body. Everything, every illness. So this is where we can actually, say, well, we don't grow our foods in traditional ways. We don't store them traditionally. We don't ferment them traditionally. We don't prepare them traditionally. Like, we had a lot of ways as ancient peoples that we got probiotics through our diet. And not none of us, but pretty much all of us living modern day life, we don't do any of that. And we don't get any of that. And our kids sure as hell aren't eating any of that, because they'll be like, ew, that's disgusting. So exactly. And then we're having antibiotics, and we're having multiple vaccinations, and we're having pesticides and GMO pesticide or toxins that explode in our gut. Like, the toxin load and the anti-life load on our digestive systems today has never existed in history before. So how do you counter all of that? Like, that's a huge load to have to counter, to go, well, how do we get the good bacteria back in there? And so, that's really why probiotics, again, therapeutic level probiotics, are an integral part of healing from any disease, from your skin to your heart to your gut to any part of you. Really, it's really an integral component.
If we had 10 different types of strains of lactobacillus, let's say, and we pick out the 2 super strains, which are the 2 that are most potent, bioavailable in the body, and they also can have properties of being antiviral or antibacterial. So guys, that means that you're taking the very highest form of a probiotic, and only that form. You're not getting it's not getting cut up with all this other stuff that's not useful or potentially hazardous to your body. And then not only is it going into your stomach to help rebuild your mucosal lining, but it's helping to break down any kind of bacterial infection that could come further. So have you guys ever heard that terminology, iron gut? Someone has an iron gut, right? Maybe 3 people get food poisoning from this meal and 1 person doesn't. Why? Their bacteria was strong enough to help break down and defend them. So this is what we're doing, putting that type of bacteria in our body. What would you recommend the average person starting out with Natren's who has a form of IBD? So let's say one of our viewers has IBD, and they're saying, I've never taken a probiotic. This is all kind of going over my head. How should I start? What should I start with? How do I get started with this?
Okay. Well, a good rule of thumb that I use with my readers is, if your primary symptom is diarrhea, start with the Bifidobacter or the Life Start, which is the baby version. If you're highly reactive, start with the Life Start B. infantis, the baby Bifidobacteria. So if you tend towards constipation, start with the Digestalac, which is the Bulgaricus bacteria. If maybe your primary symptom is heartburn, start with the Megadophilus. And then see if you can tolerate those. If you can't, switch to a different one. Because again, you don't know what your body's going to do until you try. So what my people do is, Natren has a Healthy Start. It's just a small bottle of each one in a tri-pack. So most people, and it's really reasonably priced, most people start there and just play with each species to see what they tolerate. But if those are your chief presenting symptoms, especially for people with IBD, you tend to either have diarrhea or constipation. So, and then of course you have spastic colon in there where you're just swinging back and forth. So I think if you were spastic colon, I would still go with the Digestalac. But diarrhea, definitely go with the Bifido or the Life Start probiotic.
A really good question I think is a hard topic is, Natren makes a dairy-free version, and then they make a dairy version. And that confuses a lot of people. Like, why, everyone says dairy is the worst thing in the world. Why is Natren making a dairy version probiotic? And what is the difference between the dairy-free and the dairy?
Well, Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying Natasha herself would be the best person to answer that question.
Yeah, I know we need Natasha on there for that one.
But I am going to tell you what I have heard and the little that I do know that I recall from our conversations, and that is that these species of bacteria have traditionally been cultured on milk, right? Okay. Yogurt, kefir are traditional ways of ingesting these substances. So I think there is an added potency that comes with something that is really the ideal food source for a certain microorganism. And so what also, it can be used to kind of help you with food intolerances and food allergies. Because, so let's say you start with the non-dairy version and you get a good gut flora, a good microbiome built up. Then I encourage people to try to start ingesting some of the dairy-based, because if you do, that will start to increase your tolerance to dairy products, which are everywhere, right? And I'm like you, Dane. I'm all about freedom. I want to be able to travel and eat wherever. I want to be able to go to someone's house and eat whatever they're serving and not suffer for it. So I figure the more we can build our digestive capability so that we can eat, it's not that we choose to eat that way for 90% of the time, but for those times that we do want to go traveling for a couple of weeks or we do want to go out for dinner, really freedom to me means you can eat whatever's available and you be fine.
Absolutely.
And, that's the point I've been at for a number, I don't even know how many years now. I don't know, 10 years or at least. And that's a tremendous freedom from, where we both came from, where, food was just such a, food could kill you, right? Yep. So for that reason, I encourage people to eventually transition to the dairy-based if they can. The other reason I really like the fact that they have the dairy-based available is that a lot of kids have not lost their tolerance to dairy, and mixing it in yogurt or milk or chocolate milk is the only way you're going to get those probiotics into those kids. And gut diseases are exploding among children. So when I'm looking at products or I'm formulating products myself, I'm always testing them on kids because the kids need to be able to take that. And kids are, the pickiest little boogers in the world. So, I always love that when we have something that's really potent and really powerful and a child will take it, Yep. So I think those are and then so you had this whole line of bacteria that were traditionally cultured on milk. That's why they're called lactobacillus, right? Lacto meaning milk. Or, from lactose and lactase and all the rest of it. And then, from there, Natasha did experimenting to see, well, if we get this potency and robustness of bacteria off of milk, what would be the equivalent non-dairy culturing medium that will give us the same type and strength of bacteria, but that will also be happy with this food source?
What I've found is, guys, unless you have a serious dairy allergy, now there's a dairy allergy, then there's a dairy sensitivity. Usually sensitivity is because you're not digesting it correctly, your immune system's responding to it because of the leaky gut, it's going through your mucosal lining, the villi are destroyed. So basically you're sensitive to it. So if you were able to take dairy at, let's say, 13 years old, and all of a sudden at 24 years old or 30 you're having a little bit of issues, most likely you have a dairy sensitivity. So with a probiotic, the reason you might be able to take yogurt over milk is because of the probiotics found in the yogurt that help break down the lactose and the casein. So when you're talking about a probiotic made in dairy medium, you are talking about a mass amounts of probiotics that break down the lactose and casein. So anything that you might not be able to digest, it's surrounded by the most potent digestible bacteria that helps break it down in the first place. So I wouldn't worry too much. Maybe like Jeannie said, start off with the dairy-free, go into a dairy version. I agree. I found it to be a little more useful, bioavailable, made a little more sense. But I switch off back and forth. If you're not sure, I agree. I think the dairy-free version is the way to go. We talked a little bit about the three-part system. And you touched on a little bit that if someone has constipation or if someone has large intestine issues or small intestine issues, what they should do. Can you just touch on that a little bit more, reiterate for them? Like if, let's say someone has constipation, how would they start and how would they grow into all 3 steps? And then if someone has, let's say, I think another popular one is urgency diarrhea. How do they start and how do they grow those 3 steps? And guys, with a health practitioner, okay? This is just a broad idea.
Exactly. This is just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with constipation, they would start with, I mean, I would think they'd be okay with a 1/4 teaspoon of the Digestalac. Start with that. If it's too much, scale back. But most people, I think, would be okay with a 1/4 teaspoon, and then gradually build up to the recommended dosage, which is 1/2 teaspoon 3 times a day. And so you might start with a 1/4 teaspoon once or twice a day. You just, and if in doubt, you just go less, because the more time you give your body to adjust, the better. So after you've worked your way up to the full dosage of, a 1/2 teaspoon of Digestalac 2 to 3 times a day, then you start adding in the Megadophilus. Okay. All right. So then you would maybe start at a 1/4 teaspoon of the Megadophilus. Keep taking your Digestalac. Don't stop on that. Now add in the Megadophilus at a 1/4 teaspoon. Gradually ramp that up till you're at the full dose of 1/2 teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day. So now you got yourself on the full dosage of 2 of the species. Now it's time to add in the Bifido, but you're going to have to be really careful with the Bifido, because if you tend to constipation, the Bifido might start to firm up your stool too much, but you still need it. You have to get that Bifido in there for your long-term health. So with the Bifido, I would start with maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon once a day. And maybe take that for 4 or 5 days, then go to a 1/4 teaspoon once a day. Take that for 4 to 5 days, maybe a whole week. So with the Bifido, you go the slowest of all of the 3 species.
To reiterate, someone who has urgency, we want to focus on the Bifido, and we want to take time with the Digestalac. Someone with constipation, we want to focus on the Digestalac. We want to take it easy on the Bifido. And I've had people who are taking one of my clients in Australia who was taking tons and just having massive issues with constipation, no matter how much Digestalac she took. We just took her off Bifido altogether until we started getting rid of it, until we could feel like get something moving. And so that's a great way of looking at it. And then, obviously, if you're getting to that maintenance stage or you're traveling, what I like to use is the Healthy Trinity, because traveling with powders, you can lose a little bit of water found in there, or something happens, and all of a sudden the whole thing gets contaminated and you lose them, or they spill, or something happens. The capsules are great for traveling. They still give you that all-around healing with a focus on Bifido, so you have to be careful of that. And one thing to everyone out there who is trying to travel, sometimes traveling with your supplements and your powders and your probiotics is hard. We all know TSA likes to give us a hard time and thinks that we're trying to take over the world with our supplements. If your ice pack is melted, TSA will confiscate it. They do have the right to do that. So it cannot be it cannot be a liquid. It has to be ice. I was just coming home 2 days ago from Los Angeles, and I had a melted ice pack, and they said, we're taking it. And it was just like, I got to go buy more again. So look out for that, but let them know that it's for health, and 99% of the time they will let you go through with any of this stuff.
Any questions, Dane, on the Facebook thing?
Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, we got one for you, Jeannie. It's actually from Katrina Cat from Australia, who is one of the most amazing people ever. Jeannie, which type would be best to use in a retention enema for severe constipation? Tried all 3 with no results, and would you not recommend it at all? Question mark.
I would do just the Digestalac in a retention enema.
Okay.
And I don't know of anyone who's tried that yet. So if you're in touch with her, if she could let us know how that works, but I can't see why it wouldn't work, because, the Digestalac is active in both the small and large intestine. So yeah, I would think that would work that would work really well. The other thing that I would ask her to take a look at is, has she used wild oregano or olive leaf to kill the pathogens in her large intestine? Because that's another important part of getting that balanced for her.
Have you seen with these strictures, a lot of people are having issues with strictures where they're taking probiotics and they're saying, I'm still having constipation, I'm still having urgency, I got a colostomy and it's showing all these, scar tissue in there. Have you seen probiotics be helpful with healing strictures or nature in probiotics?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that changing that gut flora is not a fast process. It takes, I would say, a minimum of 6 months to start to shift that to any degree of reliability. And then most people, we're looking at a minimum of a year on a full therapeutic dose to really see a change in the microbiome. So people, and especially like I said, because of all the assaults in our environment, in our water supply, in our food supply that are ongoing. So people need to really clock that in their mind. This is not a quick fix. This is, plan on 6 months minimum. And then, along with that, I think you have to, like for strictures, it'll prevent inflammation. So in terms of preventing the formation or the adding to the scar tissue, yes. Can it help with existing strictures? I'm not sure, possibly a little bit, but I don't think enough to make exactly.
Well, Ollie asked, Dane, how do you convince others about the importance of taking probiotics? And Ollie, you really can't convince anything of any, convince people to do anything. I think that what you do is you live by example, and if people want to change their life, then you give them an option, and then they have the choice to take it or not. And I think Jeannie's a shining example of what can be, despite what the doctors told her. And my story thus far has been a shining example of what you can do, despite what the doctors say. And, I'm fierce about this. I have no tolerance for putting a prison on what is possible. We are still growing. I'm still learning every day. I'm sure Jeannie's still learning every day. It's addicting because technology and information is constantly changing what we know and what we can do. So stick with it and keep with it. And I think be a shining example for others, and they'll follow. Jeannie, can you talk on that a little bit about Herxheimer reaction?
Well, I think you totally covered it adequately there.
I'm running with it.
You did. And, that's really great because for me, it's so long ago, I can't even really remember what happened but you just gave an awesome summary of all of the components that you can watch for. And, some people will even get flu-like symptoms, because the body is just like, purge and detox. And that's, your liver is working really hard. Your kidneys are working really hard. And so this is another point too. For these healing processes, they require a lot of energy. So when you're healing yourself, you need to dial back your schedule. Maybe for a lot of people in extreme disease states, they have to only work part-time, or some of them need to take a sabbatical from their job. Because sometimes just lying on the couch while your body goes through the detox process and your tissues start to heal and add in like 100 bazillion new cells a day to rebuild your tissue and your lining, you can imagine how much energy that takes. So there's got to be a process, a mind-body process of honoring that and giving your body the time and space to heal, to detox, to build new tissue, to form new muscle, like all of the processes that have to take place.
Where does the disease even start from? So let's say, for instance, someone doesn't see a direct hereditary issue, because that's an easy connection. Let's say that it doesn't run in the family, like it doesn't run in my family. But what would you say would be the start?
Well, so a bunch of them we've already touched on. Okay, so you told us what your diet looked like, right? All that fast food, all of high sugar intake, because bad bacteria live on sugar. Yeast, candida lives on sugar. Yep. vaccination, antibiotic usage, not followed by probiotics or taken concurrently with probiotics, stressful emotional events, huge correlation between physical or sexual abuse, especially in childhood, and people who go on to develop Crohn's. Lesser degree of colitis, but it's still there. IBS, the correlation is there in spades. So you have to kind of take this holistic view of what are you putting in your mouth? What's your living environment like? What are your exposure to environmental hormones? What is your exposure to pesticides and herbicides? Because these things are all direct triggers. You have to kind of look. Heavy metals, right? What are you getting poisoned with through your water supply? Heavy metals, fluoride, dental mercury, and so on and so forth. There's in my book, my Listen to Your Gut book, I have a whole list that people can go through to go, okay, what could possibly be all of the correlating factors to my developing this dis-ease, this unease, this imbalance in my body? Because sometimes it's one thing, like sometimes it can be one course of antibiotics that triggers someone into colitis, but usually there's a mix of symptoms. And often you can have say 4 of the physical items on that list, and then your triggering event is emotional. It's some kind of trauma or abuse or, a huge stressor in relationship or in your lifestyle that's actually the trigger that tips you over into dis-ease.
Okay, yeah, great point. So one thing I would add on to that, Claudia, is, I really have yet to find someone I was working with who didn't tell me they were under a great amount of stress when they got diagnosed or when they had the first amount of symptoms. So, when you're engaging your stressful nervous system, your sympathetic state, what do we know? And I'm a believer that evolution weeds out the weak for generations to come. Stress, okay? So stress is the way that evolution says, hey, this organism right here probably shouldn't keep moving on. And this is why. When you get stressed and you engage the nervous system, which is the central unit of your entire body, it's the control panel of your body. When you engage the stress sympathetic nervous system state, we know a few things happen. Your digestive system reduces inability. Your reproductive system reduces inability. And your immune system reduces inability. So basically, when you're stressed, you can't eat as much, you can't digest that food, you can't reproduce, and you can't fight off infection. So we know that you use your rational mind to get away from things that are emotionally stressful, right? You can't control your emotions. Use your rational side to say, I'm going to go ahead and decide not to go this direction because I know it's going to make me upset. Or these people, or the show, or this state of living, whatever it is. So create structure in your day to get away from the stress. I think there's some things that were effective with me getting Crohn's and colitis was one, a lot of these performance stuff like protein shakes and like creatine and stuff like GNC was selling. Because when I was 14 or 15, I was so obsessed with gaining muscle and getting big. And, I ended up getting in Men's Fitness magazine and Men's Health magazine, but I paid for it. And I think the prebiotics and those things, this crappy whey protein I was drinking 3 times a day, the fast food I was eating to try to gain weight because I was a skinny kid, I think had a huge part of it. And the amount of pesticides. I remember when I was 16 once, I went to eat at Chili's, at the Chili's restaurant. I ate a bunch of chips and salsa, and I had a chicken fajita, and my stomach was about out to here. And everyone thought it was funny, and I thought it was funny too. But now looking back, it wasn't so funny. Those were the first symptoms of something that nearly killed me. But can reverse it. So that's an answer there. And I know we've been on this for a long time, so let's wrap up with just the last 2 questions. Jeannie, I know you touched on kids for a little bit. For any parents out there, could you give them a little bit of information of how they can start their kids off with this? And is it safe for a toddler? Is it safe for a 4-year-old? Is it safe for an 11-year-old? How should they approach that situation?
I started my newborn babies, I think at week 2 on the Life Start, the B Infantis probiotic. And I would just put it in a little soy sauce dish, dip my finger in it, and they'd suck it right off my finger. And I'd give them probiotics every day because, again, I wasn't relying that they got enough good bacteria coming through my body, because this is something I knew I was deficient in, right? I had this big struggle with Crohn's. So I wanted to make sure that they got extra right from day one. So for babies, you only give them the Life Start, the B. infantis. And then once they start eating regular food, you can move them on to the other species, the Megadophilus, the Bifidofactor, and the Digestalac. And again, for the kids, we talked about this quite a bit. The easiest way is to put it in a dairy, is to get the dairy-based probiotic and mix it into a dairy item like either yogurt, and take a little bit, mix it into a really smooth paste. Because if the kids get a lump, they're not going to touch it again. If your kids are super picky, don't let them see you mixing it in. Go around the corner, mix it in, here's your yogurt, here's your hot chocolate, and your hot chocolate, you don't make it hot, you just make it, little bit hot, like for a child. Basically, you can make it up to body temperature, so 98 degrees, or chocolate milk or regular milk, and then you just hand it to them and they'll down it. They won't even know it's in there. If your child is not picky and they're a little more cognitive, you can involve them in the process.
So last question, Jeannie, and then if anyone has questions, so listening, go ahead and put them below. We'll answer them right afterwards. If you could give one last piece of advice for anyone who's debating to use Natren probiotics, and maybe it's because they're really probiotics and they've never worked before, what would you say? What would you say to them who's kind of on the edge?
Well, I mean, I'd say listen to this broadcast.
Yeah, rewind, start again, do it again.
Exactly. I mean, what more can we say? I'd go, well, I am not one on forcing people to do anything. I'm really like, look, if you want to keep your disease, keep your disease. Maybe that person's not ready to heal. Maybe if they start healing, there's a toxic relationship that they're going to have to let go of, and they don't want to go there. So they're going to come up with all kinds of reasons why they can't get on that pathway. You know what? It's all fine. I hold no judgment for those people. It's your own life. You make your own choices. And if you can find another probiotic that works, that gives you the results, have at it. Good, go for it. I did not. This is the one I recommend to my readers because they can't get these results with any other probiotic. So, it's the money is the money, get someone to give it to you for your birthday. Get your mom to gift it to you. Like, there's a lot of ways. Come on. Everybody owns a cell phone, for God's sake. Like, if you can afford a cell phone, you can afford probiotics. I mean, this is ridiculous. The cell phone is, kind of, if you don't need a cell phone to live, right? I mean, of course you like it. It's convenient, whatever, but your gut flora is like your whole life. So I'd say look at your priorities, really.
I agree. Guys, we're not here to just try to just push and push and push on Natrens. The reason we're both talking about Natrens is because we used other things. They weren't giving us the effects. We were researching probiotics, and we looked at this company and said, whoa, this is 5 out of 5 hitting home runs. And then we've both been able to talk with the owners of the companies and have legitimate conversations about what our concerns are, or see some people we've been working with that have been very much helped by this. So this is just about creating a solution. I'm never going to try to make my own probiotic. As Natasha says, it is like rocket science. So today, if you ever see a private label Dane Johnson probiotic, I don't know. Maybe
it's not yours.
It's not mine. Yeah, it's false advertising. False advertising. So it just, you got to go. If you find a company that's the best, you talk about it. So this is what that's about. And if I could give one last piece of advice for anyone who's on the edge with price and things you don't need as much. Maybe you're thinking about taking a few different random supplements that aren't your core supplements. Maybe you're using that for, some anti-inflammatory like curcumin or turmeric or, like some fish oils or something. Get rid of that for right now. That's all well and good, but you need to focus on core products. So I talk about core products and then beneficial products. This is 100% absolutely a core product, not only to reducing symptoms, which is diarrhea, urgency, issues in the future with any kind of bad bacteria, rebuilding your mucosal lining integrity, having a proper stool, and reducing root cause. So reduce the symptoms, heal root cause, and as Jeannie says, poof, eventually the goal is that you don't have Crohn's anymore. You know, the term cure is absurd. I mean, because if you cure yourself of the flu and then it comes back 8 months later, did you cure it or did you put it in remission? I mean, who knows? I mean, curing something is a big word, and but you can get to a situation where you live your lifestyle the way you want, you're empowered, and you don't have to worry about having a flare. That's the point. You're going to need probiotics one way or the other to do that. You're going to have to rebuild the mucosal lining. My one point here is that do not think you're going to take probiotics and continue to eat that bad diet and put yourself under a lot of stress and sleep 4 hours a night and work 17 hours a day and think you're going to get great results and then blame it on the probiotics. You know, the probiotics might be your nail, but you're going to need a hammer to drive it in. So, you know, it has to be part of an entire program. Don't just look at this as the savior. It's not. It can make great benefits, and I hope it does. But if you put it as part of your entire program, I use my SHIELD program, then you're going to look at optimal results, optimal life, optimal, you know, whatever legacy you want to leave and footprint you want to leave. That's what this is all about to me.
Yeah. And if people want additional help, they can become one of your clients. So there you go. And then they can get that guidance, right? Where their doctor can't support them and their doctor can't, you know, give them the kind of, you know, tried and tested advice. Because I don't do consultations. I'm not legally able to do that, but you can and you do, and you'd be a tremendous support for someone walking this process.
Absolutely. Sorry, you cut out there for a little bit. The internet's going a little bad. So I didn't get that last part, but the, you know, one of the reasons I started consulting people was because I wanted to be able to give back. I was in such a state of depression and anxiety, and I didn't feel like there was anyone really to help except the books. My consultations came from reading Jeannie's book, or reading Jordan Rubin's book, or reading Dave Klein's book, or reading this, you know, book on mind-body connection, or cultivating positive energy. I just read books every day, and that was my ability to talk with other consultants when I couldn't find any. So, you know, I consult now to really just really help people in their state of struggle. And when I find the right person that works for me, and then, you know, I work for them, and we find that unison, then I'm happy to help and happy to guide and build that structure. I have my protocol, which is the SHIELD program. That's basically a personalized healing program that looks at your supplements, your herbs, your imagination of where you want to go, your exercise, your lifestyle, and your diet is best for you. So I hope I can do that. I'm building an online program right now so that we basically just went to a healing home in the mountains in Big Bear Lake, California, and filmed all these videos of how to turn your house into a healing home and how to exercise and cook and use nature and probiotics. So that's the goal, is to start putting all that information online for you guys so it's affordable, it's there for you, and hopefully people like Jeannie can continue to just help build and grow and answer the questions we're all looking for. And if no one else has any questions, I mean, Jeannie, is that anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot.
I think we did. We went hard.
Yeah, we did. People are gonna have to watch this like 3 times to get all the information on here.
Yeah. Maybe we'll try to do a version. I know when you start talking, you start going off and have stories and stuff like that. So.
But it's not simple. This healing journey, this holistic, real healing journey is not simple. We can't simplify it anymore because it's real life. It's multifactorial. It's multifaceted. It's complicated. It's messy. That's what life is, right? Yep.
And if we tried, we'd be doing them an injustice. We'd be lying to them. Yeah. We'd be telling them there's a quick fix. There's not. You know, I spent years with natural medicine school. I spent years at home trying to figure things out. I spent years sick, and it just didn't happen overnight. It was a cumulative amount of things done every day for a long, long period of time. And so when we're talking to you guys, you know, there isn't a way just to tell you we have to become our own best doctors, not our only doctors, our best doctors, and start educating ourselves on our health. You know, the funny thing about our society, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, is we're expected to know how to take care of our finances. We're expected to know how to raise our children. We're expected to know how to keep an environment that's conducive for living and being a citizen. But for some reason, we don't feel we should take it on ourselves to take care of ourselves or, understand our own health and our own bodies. We should be teaching this in kindergarten, and that's not our fault. Our society needs to be growing that way. But this is our responsibility. And when you take it on, you're going to be a value add not only to yourself, but to your family and your friends. And if you want, and you get passionate about it, you can jump on these calls with me, and we'll make them,
Preach it, Dane. You tell him.
That's right.
Got it from the mountaintop. I love it.
Yeah, I'm coming. Okay, Jeannie, thank you so much. If there's no other questions, this was amazing. Thank you. And I think we answered everything here. You can go to Jeannie's site, listentoyourgut.com, has fantastic supplements. Her book is a must-have. It is the bibliography library of all the questions you need. Definitely check it out. I still use it today for a lot of the issues I want to handle with my clients. If you want to learn more about me, see my story, or work with me personally, check out my SHIELD program. It's Crohn'sColitisLifestyle.com. The SHIELD program online coming September 1st. And that's it.